The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail was published in 1982 and has sold millions of copies worldwide. Hugely controversial because of the theory it proposes that Jesus Christ did not die on the cross, but instead married and produced children whose bloodline may still exist today. It was the inspiration for the best-selling novel The Da Vinci Code, which also became a film and massive box office success. What's suggested in The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail is intriguing, no doubt. But the events at Rennes-le-Château and historical involvement of the mysterious Cathars led me to believe that this book could be alluding to much larger concepts, some of which may go as far back as ancient Egypt. The possibilities and questions wouldn't go away. So the obvious thing to do was visit Languedoc, Cathar country, in the south of France, and have a look around. The story of Jesus Christ is well known, and the alternative interpretation, that it's simply an amalgamation of the stories of famous characters from other religions, Mithras, Krishna, and Dionysus for example, is at least as controversial as the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, because it suggests that Jesus Christ never actually existed in physical form, and the S-O-N of God could have simply been the S-U-N of God. If correct, the 12 disciples are just personifications of the 12 signs of the zodiac. The cross upon which Jesus was crucified represents the constellation of the Southern Cross, or again the cross at the center of the zodiac wheel. The resurrection after 3 days describes the sun's position in the sky during the winter solstice, and Jesus' ability to walk on water alludes to the path of the sun as it crosses oceans between land masses. This theory is nothing new, and Earth's orbit around the sun could also explain the references to wine in Christianity. Water was turned into wine. Jesus was provided with a sponge soaked in vinegar whilst on the cross. Wine is consumed during Holy Communion, symbolizing the blood of Christ, and sangrial, or royal blood, is even mentioned in the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. Why grapes and wine, rather than barley and ale or apples and cider, could be because the world's principal wine production regions border on the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer. Grapes grow particularly well in these areas because there's plenty of sunshine to encourage growth, but also sufficient cold for the vines to rest. And this is part of a much larger concept, because the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer are also known as the Golden and Silver Gates.
Very important symbol that many may be familiar with is the crossed gold and silver keys that is the emblem of the Vatican. And the symbol actually has a crown on top of it. The symbol speaks volumes of information about how the cycles work, the 5 stages of consciousness, because the keys themselves are pointing to the 4 seasons of consciousness, and the crossing point is that portal back to center, that Gnosis that we speak about. And these keys themselves are representing, each key represents a portal, and the silver key is the portal when gods become men, and the golden key opens the gate to the portal where men become gods. These words Capricorn and Cancer become the tropics of Capricorn and Cancer. This is what we label the container of how the sun moves in its sine wave pattern, this cosmic serpent across the ecliptic of the spinning earth. And again, if you think of this energetically as this electromagnetic patterning of this, the angle of the sun as it rises on the horizon, hitting the different latitudes as it moves from the Tropic of Cancer to the Tropic of Capricorn, across the path of the earth as it spins, this is the patterning of the nature of how we experience reality. What's really exciting about this expression is that Capricorn and Aquarius, the starting points of both these portals, are ruled by Saturn. And Leo and Cancer are the sun and the moon. And both points begin at the end or the beginning of Leo, basically. And Leo is ruled by the sun, and the sun rules gold. So again, we have our lead into gold. This is the alchemy. This is the true alchemy of what the ancients were speaking to us. This is how you turn lead into gold.
And what about Mary Magdalene? Did she actually exist? After all, it was the restoration of the Church of Mary Magdalene that caused Berenger Saunier to stumble across the parchments that manifested this great fortune and eventually led to the theory proposed in the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. This, apparently, is the cave of Mary Magdalene, who, according to local legend, lived in Languedoc after fleeing Jerusalem. What should be a high-profile historical site is simply at the side of a road near Rennes-le-Château and completely unprotected. There is no guard, no ticket office, and it doesn't even have a fence or a gate. This seems hardly befitting of such a famous historical character, unless, again, Mary Magdalene is just a personification of environmental events, but this time for the energies of planet Earth, or telluric currents, where Magdalene actually means magnetic line.
Geomagnetic currents, telluric currents, electromagnetic currents that the ancients would call song lines or dragon lines or ley lines, Mary and Michael lines if you're in the UK. These lines are extremely powerful earth currents, electromagnetic, and I believe the ancients could feel these currents so, very much like our animals and birds and insects can feel them today. We know that you know, the bees and scarab beetles even and birds are navigating these currents to create their own natural patterns. And so I believe that the ancient humans had this capability as well. It's a sense that we've forgotten, and I think we can remember again.
You know, I mentioned Mary Magdalene. Look at the name as symbolic itself. Mary Magdalene, it's magnetic. It's a magnetic line. So when we talk about the path of Mary Magdalene as she moves through Paris, and you know, the Da Vinci Code was written around this concept of how important these powerful electromagnetic, geomagnetic lines are.
If you visit Languedoc, you'll notice the amount of hematite in the area. The name comes from the Greek meaning blood-like stone, and its rich colour is due to ferric oxide. Now, the south of France is not the only place in the world where hematite is found. It's very common, and there is no proven relationship between telluric currents and ferric oxide. But we do know that telluric currents are electric, and electricity is always accompanied by two things: heat and magnetism. With magnetism, we're talking about magic, and of course the Magi, the three wise men who appeared at the very beginning of the story of Jesus Christ. Iron is attracted to magnetism, and words that begin with Fe sometimes refer to the chemical symbol for iron. And with iron, we're straight back to the mysteries of ancient Egypt, with felines, fertility, and of course females. Isis, Venus, and Magdalene are all iterations of the sacred feminine. So the theory proposed in the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail may be correct, but only if Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene existed in physical form. If they didn't, then the real blood of Christ is wine, and the blood line that continues today is viticulture. There is very little known about the Cathars. According to the history books, they were an intelligent and civilized people who settled in the Languedoc region of France in the 11th century. Their belief system was dualistic and included elements such as alchemy, magic, mysticism, and Gnosticism. Gnosticism in particular being a bone of contention at the time for the Catholic Church, as it suggests that knowledge comes from within, direct personal contact with God, rather than having to go through established external sources, like the Catholic Church. With such an obviously blasphemous belief system, it wasn't long before the Cathars found themselves on a collision course with the Vatican, and in the early 12th century, Pope Innocent III ordered a crusade. Tens of thousands may have been killed, and apparently, hundreds of Cathars were burned alive right here at Chateau de Montségur. Now, each element of the Cathars' belief system, duality, alchemy, magic, mysticism, and Gnosticism, they're all Egyptian. The name Cathar is derived from catharsis, which means purging or cleansing, like a flood. And in Egypt there is plenty of evidence of at least one ancient catastrophic event. According to Ignatius Donnelly, the human race took refuge from the Great Flood here at Mount Cardo, which is part of the Pyrenees mountain range, and of course in Egypt there are plenty of pyramids. Coincidences perhaps, or it could be that the Cathars, or possibly Cathars, were descended from the survivors of a Middle Eastern catastrophe, or cataclysm, who relocated to southern France, bringing their mystical belief system with them. The Cathars were rumoured to be very wealthy, and in possession of a great treasure, which according to some accounts was gold and silver, and the few that escaped the massacre at Chateau de Montségur apparently took this treasure with them. Now, although people can do extraordinary things when under extreme pressure, Chateau de Montségur is on top of a mountain, at an altitude of 1,200 meters, that's nearly 4,000 feet, and the idea of anyone descending this extreme gradient whilst also carrying boxes or sacks of heavy metals is a tall order. So it's possible that the gold and silver mentioned in the Cathars story are only symbolic. Perhaps again references to Egyptian mythology in the form of the sun and moon, and, as speculated by some, the real treasure of the Cathars may have been the Holy Grail itself, the legendary cup that Jesus drank from during the Last Supper. This is, of course, all relying on the underlying assumption that the history books are correct, and accurately portray the plight of the people who really physically lived here in Languedoc. Because if you look into it, things become a little less clear. Apparently, the Cathars never actually built any of these castles. They weren't very keen on physical labour or fighting battles, and employed other people to do these things for them. They also completely rejected materialism. So there are very few artifacts, and the Cathar museums are just recreations and historical guesswork. There are no graves, because the Cathars supposedly buried their dead at secret locations to prevent them being exhumed by the Inquisition. In fact, due to this acute absence of physical evidence, there are scholars and historians today who remain unconvinced that the Cathars ever actually existed. If Jesus Christ never existed in physical form, then it follows that the Holy Grail didn't either. And if you're a history researcher, this is where the stories and descriptions start to overlap. Because Chateau de Montségur is reported to have not only been one of the resting places of the Holy Grail, but also the Ark of the Covenant. Oh my, yes indeed. The two most famous missing artifacts in human history, both originally from thousands of miles away in the Middle East, apparently once rested at Chateau de Montségur in southern France. According to some accounts, the Holy Grail was originally once part of the contents of the Ark of the Covenant, and under Heinrich Himmler, the Nazis searched Chateau de Montségur and the surrounding area on 2 separate occasions, attempting to find these artifacts. This all seems suspiciously coincidental, unless, of course, just like Jesus Christ, Mary Magdalene, and the Cathars, the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant never existed in physical form. And if this is the case, it would go a long way to explaining why, despite countless attempts, neither of them have ever been found. But that hasn't stopped anyone looking. This hole was dug in the grounds of Rennes-le-Château, on the assumption that precious metals, a cup, or some other kind of physical item had been buried there. Whilst it's quite possible that the treasure of the Cathars, the Holy Grail, and the Ark of the Covenant were different iterations of the same non-physical thing. But, if non-physical, what exactly was this thing? In terms of etymology, Ark, with a K, in general refers to a box or a chest. This would fit both the biblical descriptions of the Ark of the Covenant and Noah's Ark, but can also mean place of refuge. And coincidentally, Montségur translates as secure mountain. Ark with a C, however, means part of a curved line, originally referring again to the sun's apparent motion across the sky, and coincidentally, there is a town called Arc in Languedoc. Covenant is derived from the Latin convenire, which means agree, meet, or unite. So it's possible that the phrase Ark of the Covenant could actually mean path of the meeting place. And if this is the case, it would explain why both the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant seem to have travelled so much, instead of being scooped up at any point and placed in a museum.
In images in the Bible and how they describe it, and in images all over Egypt, that this ark that they carry, which interestingly enough has 4 golden rings at the corners, spins, and it's held up by 2 poles, magnetic poles, that are separated to create the expression of this reality, dipoles. And it moves, it's constantly being moved across the area. We see it going to Jerusalem, we see it going to the King's Chamber. We hear stories of it being in Japan. We have stories of it being in Roslin Chapel in Scotland. And now we're told it might possibly lie in Ethiopia.
Rather than a physical box or a cup, this elusive thing that people have spent centuries looking for could simply be information. For example, a secret, a password, a formula, or a forgotten technique. The 12th century chapel of San Bartolome in the Rio dos Lobos Canyon, Spain, was known as the Templars' place of power. It was built in a very specific location at a point of maximum telluric resonance, and during the winter solstice, when the sunlight enters through the rose window of the transept, it is said to illuminate a particular area on the floor, known as the health slab. Coincidentally again, this chapel's interior columns are believed to contain another reference to the resting place of the Ark of the Covenant. Chateau de Montségur is on top of a mountain, with a hematite core, and mountains are known to influence the path of telluric currents. This particular chateau is also very special because it's aligned with the summer solstice, and during the winter or summer solstices, the movement of the sun in the sky appears to stop. This movement can be represented as a sine wave, and at the peak or nadir, there is a pause. A place where there is literally no thing. And according to the ancients, this is the point of Gnosis.
Gnosis is a state of consciousness where we just know. We know, and it's silent. It's the place, you know, it's why we meditate. We try to go into this silent place within to find moments of inspiration. And that silent place is, you know, I spoke to the pauses that happen at the height and the bottom of cycles. This is those moments when everything stops, when everything inhales back into center, into the heart. You can liken it to the picture, you know, how when light hits a prism, it explodes into all these different colors of frequency. Well, that's only the expression, that's the exhale from center. But you can almost imagine all of those colors being inhaled back into that light source. And that light source is colorless, and it has no tone, and it has no sound, it has no waveform, it has no life, because it just knows. It's silent and centered, and it's no thing. It just knows, and then it breathes out again.
These two elements, telluric currents and the solstices, may finally begin to explain the true nature of the Holy Grail, and its potential predecessor, the Ark of the Covenant. The union of masculine and feminine, where Jesus Christ represents the sun, and Mary Magdalene represents telluric currents. In other words, by combining your geological location with the sun's movement, you may be able to access higher knowledge, communicate directly with God, or even manifest a new existence. The Cathars were rumored to be very wealthy. Mary Magdalene was also said to be wealthy, and the man at the center of this mystery, Berenger Saunier, suddenly and without explanation became incredibly rich. Others involved with the discovery at Rennes-le-Château, such as Antoine Gelly, Henry Boudet, and Nicolas Fouquet, also became inexplicably affluent. This theory may well be incomplete, but if the elements presented here do actually lie on the path of ultimate truth about the Holy Grail, what better way to conceal this knowledge than by telling everyone to keep looking for a cup? They'll be searching for decades, if not centuries, and will never find it. Also, if the Holy Grail really is just a matter of being in the right place at the right time, it's easy to see why the Catholic Church felt so threatened, and was even prepared to exterminate an entire religion to keep this a secret. Because anyone can do it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to this channel.